Welcome back to the channel. I'm super excited because today we're going to talk about something that comes up all the time, and that is intermittent fasting. I want to break it all down for you. I want to talk about exactly what is intermittent fasting, and I also want to talk about what it is not. I want to give you some examples of intermittent fasting and how it works, and then I want to talk about who this might be good for and who it might not be good for. So go grab your coffee and let's get this show on the road. So let's talk about what is intermittent fasting. I think people seem to think it's a diet. And let's clarify this. Intermittent fasting is not a diet. It is a meal timing strategy. And in the simplest of terms, what that means is you have a predetermined set of time where you eat your calories for the day. And then you have another predetermined set of time where you fast, where you don't eat at all. And that fasting window tends to be carried on overnight. So you're sleeping through part of that fasting window. I think intermittent fasting also gets the nickname of the no breakfast diet. I mean, it's not a diet, but people nickname that the no breakfast diet because essentially that's what you're doing. So if we want to keep this really simple, you're basically not eating breakfast and you have a designated time where you're going to eat your meals, whether you eat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, it doesn't matter how many, but you have a window of time where you eat your calories for the day, and then you have a bigger window of time where you don't eat at all. That's essentially what intermittent fasting is. So now let's talk about the different ways that you can actually do intermittent fasting. Okay, let's talk about the different examples of intermittent fasting. There's a bunch of different ways to do intermittent fasting, but I've listed 3 of the most common ways. So let's talk these through and break them down. The first one is 16 and 8. So what that means is you're going to fast for 16 hours and then you're going to eat in an 8-hour window. So what that could look like, 8 a.m. to noon, you're not eating. That is part of your fasting window. 8 a.m. to noon, 0-calorie drinks, black coffee, water, whatever. At noon, your eating window can start. Noon to 8 would be your eating window. So if you planned your meals out during that window, you could have lunch at noon, then you could have meal number 2 at let's say 3 p.m., and then maybe meal number 3 at let's say 7 p.m. That's just a sample of how you could spread out your meals from noon to 8. And then from 8 p.m. to noon the next day, you're fasting. That's the most common way that people do intermittent fasting. Now, having said that, a lot of people, women especially sometimes, and I put me in this category, 16 hours is a long time to go. And I tried intermittent fasting several years ago. I did better with a 14-hour fasting window, not a 16-hour window. So basically that just shifted everything 2 hours earlier. I started my eating window earlier and I did a 14 and a 10. And that worked really well for me. I felt energized. I felt like I could stick to it. I did have to give this some time to try, but that tended to work for me. So again, there's flexibility with this. This is not etched in stone, but that's a sample of what it could look like for the 16 and 8. Okay, so the second example of intermittent fasting is the ADF method, and that is the alternate day fast. So what that means is one day you're gonna be at maintenance calories, and then the next day you're gonna be super low, like 400, 600, essentially nothing. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's super, super low calories. Some people like that. Some people like going an entire day with hardly any food on board. Other people don't like that at all. And I think this is going to be definitely personal preference. Sometimes people end up taking their maintenance day a little bit too high because they're so hungry by the time they get back to a maintenance day. So if you're one of those people who like to go almost an entire day with not eating much at all, this could be an option for you. So this is the alternate day fast. Okay, so the last intermittent fasting method that I want to talk about is the 24 method, and that's also known as the warrior diet, I think. And this one is pretty severe. It sounds really interesting on the surface. So hear me out. You go 20 hours with not eating anything. And then you have 4 hours to eat whatever you want. However much you want, whatever you want. 4 hours, get it all in there. And on the surface, you're like, man, this is great. 4 hours, I'm gonna go on this feeding frenzy, and then I don't eat for 20 hours. So, but let's play this out. Here's what happens when you do this. When you first start out, you can't eat as much as you think you can in 4 hours because your stomach's just not used to it. Your body's not used to consuming a ton of food in 4 hours. So on the onset, you're probably gonna lose some weight from that because you can't consume a lot of food in 4 hours. However, as you continue with this, your body adapts and you will be able to eat more food in 4 hours and more, and your body will continue to adapt. And then what's gonna happen is you're gonna be going way over your calories in that 4 hour period, and you're gonna find that whatever progress you thought you were making, you're not making anymore. In fact, you may be and probably will be going the other way. So this one is really kind of a dangerous one, especially if you have a history of disordered eating, binge eating, just disordered relationship with food. Probably not a great option for you because it could very well encourage those binging tendencies by eating as much as you can, whatever you want, without thinking about it in a short period of time. So if you're in that category, this is probably not a great option for you, and I would definitely tell you to stay clear. And just as a note for all of these examples, intermittent fasting in general may not be a great fit for you if you do have a history of binge eating or an eating disorder. All right, so the last section here, intermittent fasting, I call them facts, okay? And really they're issues that come up frequently. I get asked about a lot regarding intermittent fasting. So let's break them down. The first thing, it's all about calories. Like any other way of eating, whether it's meal timing or a diet, intermittent fasting is only going to work for fat loss if your calories are in check, meaning you're in a calorie deficit. If you're going through intermittent fasting, eating as much as you want and not keeping track like you might be doing down here on the 24, you won't lose fat. You still have to be in a calorie deficit. That rules everything. So understand that going in. If your calorie deficit number is 1,800 calories, you still can only eat 1,800 calories in your eating window, okay? You might only be eating 2 to 3 meals, and so your meals may be larger as a result. It may feel like you're eating more, but make sure you're still within your calorie deficit so you can still continue to lose weight. So calories are king. That's the first and most important thing. The next thing that comes up all the time is, well, what if I wake up in the morning and I like my coffee, but I like to have a little splash of cream in it? Is that gonna ruin everything? The answer is no. If your goal is fat loss, a splash of cream is not going to keep you from losing fat. If you want to get really technical, does it break your fast? Okay, maybe it does. But if you're doing this because you want to lose fat, who cares? Who cares? I think people get way too hung up on this and understand the purpose of why you're actually doing this meal timing strategy. If it is to help you with fat loss, then have some cream with your coffee, for God's sakes. If you're putting a whole pint of half and half in there, of course, that's a totally different issue. But if you're just putting a splash of cream and it's gonna help you be able to sustain something, then do that. Because the cream in the coffee is not the problem. I can guarantee you that. So if you like cream, have some cream in your coffee. Absolutely. The next thing, and this comes up a lot. People ask me, what if I train early in the morning during my fasting window? So a couple things. You can definitely, if you want to sip on some BCAAs while you're training, go ahead. I don't like them. I think they're awful tasting or whatever, but you can for sure do that. That's fine. Even if you want to sip on a protein shake or something while you're training, that's okay. Again, we're overthinking what's happening here. So let's talk about two final things. Who would intermittent fasting be good for? And I like to say this. The first thing that comes to my mind is people that don't like to eat first thing in the morning when you wake up. If you're not a breakfast person, intermittent fasting could be a great thing for you, because a lot of times people open their eating window at noon. That gives you all morning. And if you're just not a breakfast person, that could work really, really well for you. It also could work well for people's schedules. Your work schedule may be crazy in the morning and you don't really have time. The only thing you can do is eat in the car on the way to work maybe. Or if you're a teacher, and I've seen a lot of teachers do this too, that maybe they don't have time to eat before they walk into their classroom, but they can eat like later in the morning at 10:30, 11, or even noon. It could work well there. So people that want to lose fat, who have a crazy schedule, and maybe who don't like to eat breakfast, intermittent fasting could be a great strategy for you as long as your calories are in check. That's the most important thing. And who intermittent fasting may not be good for. And this is really important because I think if you have a history of binge eating or any kind of eating disorder, but especially binge eating, I'm not sure that intermittent fasting would be a great choice for you, simply because whatever method you do, you will be eating larger meals. You will be saving calories for the end of a day. And a lot of times people with binge eating tendencies tend to do that. They tend to save calories up for the evening and they just use that as a justification to have an all-out binge, which could be the case here as well. So it doesn't mean you can't do it. I would just maybe think twice about doing it and see where you are with your relationship with food before you consider doing any one of these methods. But basically, if you don't like breakfast and you have a crazy schedule and you have a great relationship with food and maybe you prefer to have your calories later on in the day because you don't want to use them for breakfast because you don't like breakfast, that this could be fantastic for you. If you have a binge eating disorder or recovering from one or trying to manage one, I'm not sure that intermittent fasting is the best choice for you. So that pretty much sums up intermittent fasting. I think it's a great strategy for some people. It's a great strategy for fat loss. Maybe not so great for a muscle building thing, but for fat loss, yes, it would be a great strategy, but it's not magical. Just because you do intermittent fasting doesn't mean you're going to automatically lose fat. It works if and only if your calories are in check. You're in a calorie deficit. So there you go. That's intermittent fasting. If you have any questions about intermittent fasting or anything else, please plop them in the comments below. Click subscribe. Again, thank you guys for being here. And if there's anything I can ever do, please let me know. Have a great day.